like to give you a quick refresher on writing equations of lines. And one form that you guys should be super comfortable with whenever you write an equation of a line is slope-intercept form. You guys pretty much have had this nailed down since you were in at least 8th grade. But you've seen this y equals mx plus b form, where our m represents our slope and our b represents our y-intercept for the graph. I've given you some information down here, the slope and the y-intercept of a example line. So if we were going to take this information and plug it into slope-intercept form, I feel like that would be very easy for you guys. So we would do y equals 2/3 x plus 5. So that's not an issue. Well, then we start introducing different forms for equations of lines, and I find my students get really confused, and that's not meant to be the case. We always have to be, comfortable with changing things from one look to another, because sometimes another look is best for that scenario. So the other form that we deal a lot with in pre-calculus is what we call standard form. Now, here's what standard form looks like. You don't see any m's or lowercase b's, if you will, but we see this capital A, B, and C with our x's and y's. What's important for you to come to grips with is it was great in slope-intercept form. The m tells you something about the graph. It's the slope. The b tells you something about the graph. It's the y-intercept. A, B, and C don't give you any special qualities about the graph. So that means you can't get into standard form just by knowing given information. You have to start in another form and then manipulate your equation to look the way this looks and to be in standard form. So some characteristics about standard form that we have to be comfortable with. Number one, the x and y are on the same side of the equation. Whoops. So if you look at your equation that you have going right now, already we definitely aren't in standard form because the x and y are on different sides of the equation. Well, that can easily be changed just by moving the 2/3 x over to the left. And it is very typical that the x comes first and the y second. So we're going to have a negative 2/3 x, and then we have a plus y equals 5. So now we are definitely closer to modeling this standard form. The other characteristic about standard form that's important to note is that A, B, and C always are representing integers. And what's important about that is that means we don't have fractions. So no fractions are ever left in standard form. So again, that kind of leaves us at a dilemma right now because we do have a fraction. But we've learned some tricks with dealing with fractions and how to get rid of them. And what I'm going to do right now is just multiply both sides of my equation by a number, and that number needs to cancel out any denominators that I have. So that LCD again. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply both sides of my equation by 3. And what that's going to do then is get distributed in on the left. And when I distribute the 3 into the negative 2/3, it totally cancels with the denominator. I'm left with a negative 2x. And then I distribute my 3 in here, and then I have a plus 3y. Very important that you don't forget this part. And then over here on the right, we have equals 15. This would be a great final standard form, which I often just abbreviate standard like this. And then you are finished with that problem if that's what I was asking you to do. So that kind of goes through those two forms. The other form that a lot of times gets overlooked is point-slope form. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. The beauty of this form, I feel, is I can give you an x and a y value, like an ordered pair. So maybe you know your point on your line is something like negative 2, 4. And then I can also give you your slope. Let's say our slope, we'll just use again the 2/3. And just with this information, I can now write an equation of a line, or at least get it started in this point-slope form. I do y minus my y value, 4, equals my slope, 2/3, times x minus my x value. So if I'm going to do minus negative 2, I'm going to actually write plus 2 here. Now, this isn't the best form to leave an answer in necessarily, but we've got the equation started. If I wanted to manipulate this equation, I just have to distribute 2/3. I can move the -4 over. I could manipulate into standard form. So this is a great go-to form to start in and then to manipulate into something else later. Hopefully this just kind of gives you a quick refresher over equations of lines, and we'll be working some more in class.